We'll start a round of 5-minute questions. So the administration has sent over an ambitious mandatory spending proposal to outcompete China with line items for the compacts of free association, hard infrastructure spending, equity for the Development Finance Corporation, and the Indo-Pacific Strategy. What's USAID's role in the outcompete China proposal?
Well, we already are making great use of the Countering Chinese Influence Fund. It gives us flexibility to do everything from support an open internet to supporting right to information laws that are being used increasingly around the world to actually publish for the first time these opaque contracts that charge these inordinate fees on infrastructure investments. Those contracts, as you know, are famously concealed often from the publics in the countries in which this debt is being incurred. I think the entire USAID model stands in contrast, as you noted, I think, at the beginning, in helping countries work.
But I'm trying to find out, Administrator, what specific, I gather the broad strokes. Is there a specific component of the outcompete China that's been delegated to your agency?
Well, I think, there are a number of subcomponents, let's say, of the outcompete China approach. There's the request that Senator Risch alluded to with additional funding to really amp up what that looks like. At present, what USAID does is we are off in the ground game for the Development Finance Corporation in identifying, for example, in the Dominican Republic, a country you and I know both know well, where tenders are, can be put out in a manner that requires open, transparent competition in a manner that would almost necessarily benefit U.S. companies. That's happened in a major port in the Dominican Republic. We are opening a new mission, finally, in Fiji, starting in September. So that's part of the Pacific Islands amp-up that is occurring as part of the Outcompete China program, and happy to get you specifics within the mandatory funding proposal.
Yeah, I would very much appreciate seeing that. Attorney to Sudan, are you making provisions for the safety and security of all USAID employees, including local employees?
We are working around the clock in pursuit of that objective in a very challenging set of circumstances. 6 USAID staff were evacuated as part of the evacuation that you mentioned at the outset. 4 Americans and 2 third country nationals from Pakistan. They arrived in Washington 2 days ago. We spoke yesterday to our Sudanese staff. We still have 29 Sudanese staff who are in Sudan, 27 of whom are in Khartoum and are basically, in most of whom, in neighborhoods that are incredibly hard to move around in. We are helping them secure onward destinations in terms of our USAID mission, for example, in Egypt or in Ethiopia, so that if they want to leave the country, they will have someplace to work. We have given them advance payments, salary increases, those kinds of things. But to be honest, Mr. Chairman, it's extremely difficult to access banks right now because even banking employees can't get to the banks. So it just underscores, again, the irresponsibility and recklessness of the leader of the SAF and the RSF in pursuing this conflict. But we will not rest unless and until
Please keep
our
the
people
committee
are safe.
abreast of where you're at in evacuating USAID employees, assuming they want to leave, and I assume that under the present circumstances, a majority of them would want to leave. But
that is the impression we have, for sure.
Last year in our hearing with your budget, I raised my concerns about violence Armenians are facing in Nagorno-Karabakh. I appreciate, I see $40 million in the budget request in assistance to Europe, Eurasia, and Central Asia funds for Armenia, in part to assist with recovery from the humanitarian impact from recent Azerbaijani assaults on Nagorno-Karabakh. But I'm concerned that these funds will be split among a number of assistance priorities, and that the assistance won't reach vulnerable Armenian populations in Nagorno-Karabakh. How much of this assistance would go towards meeting the needs of vulnerable communities in Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh as they recover from Azerbaijani aggression?
I don't have that figure off the top of my head, and I think everything is very fluid there,
All
especially
right,
in light of
would you get
developments
that
this
for the
week.
committee, please? I'd like
As
to
soon
see
as we
that.
have it, but again, these are decisions that are made on a weekly basis, on the basis of.
Well, there must
the
be
basis
some
of need.
concept out of 40 million.
Well, we've
what
we've
you
conducted
intend to
2
use.
assessment missions to the region to look at the needs specifically in
When you
Nagorno-Karabakh.
get the assessment, I'd like to see the assessment.
Okay.
And particularly how you're going to help be able to achieve delivering humanitarian assistance in the Lachin corridor. Lastly, I published a comprehensive plan for securing our borders and managing migration and refugees in the Americas. A plan recognizes the fact that most migrants and refugees on the move in our hemisphere are not seeking to come to our border. There's 20 million people who are displaced in the southern hemisphere already throughout countries, some refugees, some seeking asylum, others are economic refugees. The bottom line is they're all over the hemisphere. Now, unless we work with those countries to create pathways and stability, there will be 20 million people on the march. And what we are facing at the southern border now will be minor in comparison to what we can. So it seems to me that we have to come with an approach that understands it's a hemispheric challenge, not just simply a southern border challenge. When the United Nations Commission for Refugees ultimately says that 20% of the world's refugee problems is in the Western Hemisphere, they only spend 8% of their funds on it. So when Colombia takes in nearly 2 million Venezuelans, something's got to give. And the list goes on and on. Now, I know that USAID, under your leadership, has started to move in the direction to support the integration of displaced populations. But we have to do more to address the migration and refugee crisis, not only from Ukraine and Syria, but also in our own hemisphere. So what can be done to significantly scale up USAID funding for integration initiatives in the hemisphere? And can I get your commitment to work with me in the appropriations process to encourage the establishment of a $300 million integration fund so that we can work towards making sure that we don't have 20 million people on the march?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just say, I think the President is broadly aligned with the view that you have laid out, and we are surging our support as best we can for integration efforts, including the really incredible effort made by Colombia to integrate more than 2 million migrants. Those efforts at integration have a direct effect on, as you said, who comes to the border, who seeks to go further north. And just give you one example, Venezuelan arrivals to the U.S. border nearly doubled after Colombia actually cut off the TPS registration deadline back in May of last year. We see that also displacement increase inside the hemisphere is increasing at a rate 17 times that, which the rate to the border is increasing, which is extraordinary when you think about this, how substantial those flows are writ large. So we already do work with the Colombians on TPS and in trying to provide support in the communities that are housing Venezuelans who've come in, but we'd be very interested in talking to you about what more we can do for countries all along the route north.
Yeah, this is a question of stability in the hemisphere, stability for the countries that have shown their willingness to accept refugees, and stability at the southern border of the United States. It should be a no-brainer. Senator